The Star Wars Battlefront franchise has been extremely turbulent and underutilized since its inception in the early to mid 2000s. Everything from scraped sequels, poor launches, and comebacks that are remembered as some of the best the gaming industry has ever seen, to genuine banger games that shaped childhoods. This franchise has been through a lot. And it was actually this franchise that was the catalyst for this channel being made. So imagine my shock the other day when I was looking through my calendar and I realized something. EA's Battlefront released 10 years ago today. Yes, 10 years ago. Like, I can't even contextualize how old that makes me feel. On the 17th of November 2015, Battlefront launched under new developers DICE and was published by EA in an attempt to reboot an iconic Star Wars game franchise that had been dormant for 10 years. And it was to mixed results. The game was slammed for a lack of content on launch, and rightly so, but it managed to cultivate a decent player base for a couple years until its sequel Battlefront 2 released in 2017. Now, despite its downfalls, this game sold extremely well. Depending on your sources, it's actually listed as the best-selling Star Wars game of all time. And I find this game to just be really, really interesting because it's realistically not a great game, but I love it. So considering it's been 10 years since the release of EA's Star Wars Battlefront, I decided to jump back into the game again, play what I could on the dead servers, and take a trip down memory lane that, as dramatic as it may sound, kind of changed my life forever. This is Star Wars Battlefront 10 years later. When Battlefront launched in 2015, it was a really complicated release for players because whilst the game undoubtedly lacked in content and was clearly rushed out the door to coincide with the release of The Force Awakens, there was still a lot to love in this game. Sure, it was disappointing that the game only featured content from the original trilogy, which was a regression when you think back to the original Battlefront 2, which was absolutely full of prequel content. But honestly, considering this game is clipped at the heels before it even launched, with it being tied to only the original trilogy, what we did get was so much fun. DICE were known for their Battlefield games, and Battlefront was essentially just going to be Battlefield with a Star Wars coat of paint, and that's basically what it was. It delivered a massive multiplayer battle experience. The maps were huge and visually impressive, the sound design was top shelf, and the gameplay, whilst undoubtedly clunky at times, felt arcadey in a good kind of way. It's pretty crazy to see just how much was changed when DICE tackled Battlefront 2 just a couple years later after this game released. A lot of the elements of the game changed, such as the hero system, which here relied solely on tokens that spawned around the map. I still remember all the times playing this game back in the day and you'd see that hero token spawn and you'd be in a mad race with jetpacks on to get there before anyone else. And when you did get there and it was yours, it was genuinely a rush. Reason being, heroes in this game are so fucking overpowered, it's not even funny. They are not balanced at all, and that was kind of part of the fun. Battlefront 2 would eventually fix this, opting for heroes that are powerful in the right hands, but if you suck, you can get killed in a couple seconds. With this game though, you can still suck, but you can also still wipe out half the map because the heroes are just that OP. But jumping back into this game again, I was immediately reminded with how immersive this game actually is. The chaotic nature of a sprawling multiplayer battle set in the Star Wars universe is just so perfect for a game like this. It kinda makes me wonder how we haven't gotten another one. But as you guys probably know, incompetence rules the gaming industry and Star Wars in general these days, but that's a topic for another time. Now, I have to say, it was great to just be back on the Battlefront again. This game is nostalgic for me now, which is insane as it feels like it released yesterday, but I want to dive into the finer details of this game and really hit home on the nostalgia. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this game, the good and the bad. Look, it's fair to say that there is still to this day a lot to love about this game and a lot to be appreciated. As to be honest, even though Battlefront 2 was undoubtedly a massive improvement on this game, there are elements of this game that I still prefer over its sequel. There's just something about the visuals here that not only hold up, but still look better than many games we see today. The maps and visuals of Star Wars Battlefront, especially when you flick it over into first person, are simply insane for a game that is 10 years old now. This game does not look like it came out 10 years ago. It's impressive the worlds and the maps that DICE managed to put together here using the Frostbite engine. Now, I know Battlefront 2 used the same engine, but there's something about this game's look, especially on maps like Hoth. It's just so perfect. It's clear that the developers who worked on this game had a deep-rooted love of Star Wars, and it definitely shows in the final product. Every blast, every explosion just feels like it's ripped straight out of a Star Wars movie. The audio and visual element of this game, DICE completely nailed. I still think at times it's better here than it is in its sequel. There's just something so immersive with this game. The blasters, I still think, feel better in this game than they do in Battlefront 2. Like, let's look at the E11, which is a super iconic Star Wars blaster. Here, it feels and sounds better than it does in Battlefront 2. There's just something about the way they went about the sound design in this game. Like, it's so perfect. And it's the first thing I noticed when revisiting the game after all this time. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get to experience this again jumping back into the game recently because this is a 10-year-old game now. It does have a sequel, which people flock to instead. So that means the best part about this game, you can't actually really play anymore. I'm of course talking about the DLC expansions. Now, this was controversial because this game launched with a severe lack of content. It had no campaign, not a whole lot to do. So there was a season pass that rectified that issue, but it was a paid season pass and it was an expensive one. But to be fair, it delivered 4 DLC expansions that made this game what it is. Shitty practice, absolutely, but they were still really good. These DLCs turned this game into something pretty amazing. The vanilla version of Star Wars Battlefront is good in its own way, but it's very, very hollow. The DLCs are where this game found life and longevity. Now again, you can't really play it anymore, but booting the game up and seeing the Outer Rim, Bespin, Death Star, and Rogue One DLCs really got the memories booting back up for me again. I had so much fun playing these DLCs back in the day, especially the Bespin one. This to me was the peak of this game. New heroes like Lando and Dengar are dropped. We had the Carbonite Freezing Chamber map and some others as well, and some of these even carried over into Battlefront 2 because they were literally that good. The Bespin DLC will forever hold my favorite memories of what this game was. To be honest though, all of the DLCs were bangers in their own right. The Outer Rim DLC delivered Nien Nunb and Greedo, along with some game modes and maps that we would again see in Battlefront 2. Bespin we already spoke about, but the Death Star DLC was also amazing. A multi-stage game mode that saw you taking down Star Destroyers, infiltrating the Death Star, and then completing a trench run. Add Bossk and Chewie as heroes and you had one hell of a DLC. And the game finished with Rogue One's DLC, which brought Scarif into the game along with Krennic and Jyn Erso as heroes. And this just meant that they went 4 from 4 with the expansions. The DLCs of this game are honestly where most of my enjoyment came from, and I really tried to get into some lobbies on these playlists, but again, 10 years on, it's borderline impossible to find games here, which kind of sucks. Now, it's also worth mentioning the game modes this game had. Game modes like Drop Zone used to be so much fun, and I'm not normally the type of gamer that likes playing the smaller modes, but I remember this game having some of the best. Now, is this nostalgia talking? Yeah, probably. I'm not fucking delusional, but damn, I had fun with that jump caster loadout on Drop Zone. It was so much fun. Look, overall, I was really happy to jump back into Battlefront 2 again. There was a lot here that surprised me, that reawakened how much I enjoyed this game a decade ago when it was in its prime. There's just so much still to love about what this game did, but there's also a lot to criticize, which takes us onto the final leg of the video. Okay, so as much as we've sung this game's praises, let's be brutally honest here and not let nostalgia cover up the cracks too much. This game has some quirks, to put it kindly. First off, there's no campaign in this game because the game was rushed out to coincide with the release of The Force Awakens. So instead, we have these little single-player side missions which are completely brain dead and have brain dead AI. It's not great at all. I played a few of them again for this video and I felt like genuinely they were that dull that if I tilted my head, my brain would leak out my ears. It was just so boring and turned me into a husk of a man. There's also the diorama mode, which exists for reasons. I don't know. Then there's the whole customization system that the game had. Look, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. You could be an alien, you could be a human. There was cool Stormtrooper skins. The Shadow Trooper was my favorite, even if you stuck out like a massive shit on snow maps, but anyway, you still looked cool. And I also remember the whole helmetless Stormtrooper thing back in the day. That was just kind of funny. But the overall progression system in this game for star cards and cosmetics was just super basic. There wasn't really any nuance to it at all. I kind of liked the simplicity in a weird way, but the lack of content with the weapons, the star cards, and the customization, it didn't really help, and it made things feel repetitive if you'd put any substantial time into the game at all. Now, when it comes to the gameplay itself, there are a lot of issues that this game had. Most of it comes from having the benefit of having poured hundreds of hours into its sequel, which refined most of these issues. But jumping back into the game again, you just feel like you're handicapped. You can't move like you could when it comes to rolling and dodging. Heroes have barely any movement, and it makes them feel like a stiff board at times. And the lightsaber gameplay is also absolutely diabolical. Now, we also spoke about the heroes being overpowered earlier, but the power-ups and vehicles are also overpowered. Like, an AT-AT or an AT-ST can just wipe out half the enemy team, which I guess makes sense from a literal aspect, but in terms of gameplay, it can be quite annoying. Same goes for strafe runs. I love the idea of jumping up in a ship and then strafe running the map, but man, it's annoying when you're on the wrong end of it. I think the biggest summary of this game's issues, though, are it just has a chronic lack of depth. It's great on the surface level, it really is, but most of the game's issues come down to it being hollow and just lacking the depth a game like this really needs. So, revisiting Battlefront 2015 10 years later in 2025 was definitely a strange experience. On one hand, it was really nice taking a trip down memory lane and revisiting what was one of my favorite games, where I had spent endless hours being a dead set gremlin of a human being playing until 4 AM in the bedroom of my parents' house. On the other hand, I was reminded of the game's shortcomings and its lack of depth, which is even more prevalent now considering the servers are basically a ghost town, which means you can't even really enjoy the game's best features and best modes. What more can I even say? Battlefront 10 years on is a beautiful but hollow game that is definitely being carried by nostalgia, but there's just something about this game that will never let me dislike it for its shortcomings. I love this game despite its flaws, and I really wish the servers were still full, because I think I'd still be playing it, to be perfectly honest. Now, if you guys liked this video and you want to see more videos like it, I actually do videos like this on my other channel, Game Overload. We do deep dive retrospective videos, which are usually much longer than this one, and we do them on a bunch of different games. This video is kind of like a nice little appetizer for what you can expect over there. So check it out, subscribe, because when I'm not posting here, I'm posting over there. So check it out. Thank you guys for watching, and take care.